Now joining us at Rebel headquarters, Betsy Sweet. Betsy is running for governor in Maine. She's got a long history of fighting for the right causes and progressive causes in that state. Betsy, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Great to have you here. Now, this is a total free-for-all. I'm not sure I've ever seen a race this crowded in my life. There's 29 people running for governor in Maine, 12 in the Democratic primary. So the natural question is, why you?
Yeah. Well, I'm running because, as you said, I've been a progressive advocate for 35 years in the State House, and I am just so discouraged at how we are not making progress, not just with the Republicans, but on the Democratic side. And the other thing is, I am running as a clean elections candidate. So in Maine, doesn't mean just not taking money from big special interests and big PACs, but we actually have a public financing system that I actually helped write back in 1996 when we thought it was a Republican problem. And so now it's so pervasive in the system that every progressive thing, or common sense progressive thing that we want in Maine, health care, minimum wage increases, good education funding, fair taxation, has been blocked because money has come in and taken it over. So I think that I am the sweet spot. I can't help myself.
Yeah, love it.
I know, I can't help myself. Someone who has been in the system and knows how to get things done, get legislation passed, get progressive ideas done. As I said, we did clean elections. I helped write and pass the first Family Medical Leave Act in the country that became the model for the National Family Medical Leave Act. So I know how to get things done. I've worked on all the budgets that we've had for 35 years, trying to make sure that people who need services get them. But I'm not part of the broken system. You know, our system is so broken inside. So I think I have those two things that come together, those qualities, and a lot of energy and enthusiasm. And in a 12-way race, I think I have a real shot. We also are going to have ranked choice voting this year. We're going to be the first state in the country to have statewide ranked choice voting. So those things really open up, clean elections and ranked choice voting really open up a lane for a progressive activist.
So I want to talk to you about both those things because they're really, really interesting. But first I have to commend you on an excellent pun, the sweet spot. It's right after my own heart. I got another one for you though. So for those of you at home who don't know, count yourself lucky, but the governor of Maine used to be Paul LePage, or he is today.
Still is.
Yeah, now he's term limited out. So Maine already had nasty for governor, so they might as well try sweet for governor.
Oh, I like that. I like that. It's good. You got it.
Because LePage, just a horrific guy, and
he prides himself on being Trump before Trump. That was his big thing.
Wow, he must be so proud.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's been a tough 7 years, which is why I think we see so many people in the race.
Yeah. So, well then, Betsy, let me ask you about the unique, really interesting parts about Maine. So you can get public financing in Maine, but
yes,
not everybody gets public financing. So what's the system? How do you get public financing, and then what do you get if you pass the threshold?
Great, it's a great question. So it's a really high bar. You have to get, in order to qualify for public financing, you have to get 3,200 people in Maine to give $5, registered voters in Maine to give $5 so that, and then in the time that you're trying to do that, you can raise seed money, but only in small amounts of $100 or less from anybody in the country. You can raise that seed money, but then you have to get 3,200 people to give you $5. Once you do that, you get $400,000. And then for every additional 800 people you get another $150,000. So in a contested primary, you can get up to $1 million. And then you have to get 16,000 more people. Once I win the primary, 16,000 more people to give $5, and then you end up with another $2 million. So it's a $3 million total, which doesn't sound like a ton, maybe from California, but in Maine, that's a very competitive amount of money. But it's, the great thing about it is instead of sitting in a 10 by 10 room dialing for dollars, trying to find rich people or rich PACs to give you money, you got to be out talking to regular Mainers and asking them for $5 and talking to them about what they want and what they need and what they think is right and wrong with Maine and what their dreams are. So it's definitely a grassroots, hard way to do it, but it's the right way.
No, I love public financing because you got to go out there and actually get it from each individual person. It isn't about how much you raise, it's about how many people you convince, and then you have access to the money. That's a great system. So I'm going to put up your links here. And by the way, it is a really nonpartisan system. Paul LePage is a terribly right-wing Republican. He won under that system. So it's not skewed towards Democrats, because some Republicans will paint it that way. Everybody gets a fair shot.
And when we passed this bill in '96, it was absolutely a bipartisan effort. I mean, it was both sides that came together to do this, and that's why we were able to do it. And back then, before anyone had done it. Now you can still opt to run as a traditionally financed candidate. And most candidates are doing that. But this year we are, I think, making history in that we have a Republican candidate who's running clean, an independent who's running clean, and a Democrat who's running clean.
Yeah. And I love that word too, running clean. Instead of getting private financing, so you work for private interests, you run clean elections instead. So I'm going to put up the links for Betsy here, and of course, if you're watching later on YouTube, or you'll have the links down below in the description box that you can just click on, and on Facebook on the comment section. But so part of the reason I do it, because if you want to help Betsy, who's been fighting for the right causes for 35 years, do that, sweetforgovernor.com. But the other reason is I wanted to ask you, so they can't give more than $100 then, is that correct?
No. Nobody can give more than $100.
Yeah, and how do you know if they're from Maine and count towards the $5 from Maine?
Okay, it's a separate system. So actually, if you're from Maine, you can give $105. So $100 goes directly to my campaign. The $5 that I raise goes to the Clean Elections Fund. So it doesn't come to my campaign. So it goes right to the $5. So it's two separate checks or two separate online things. And only people from Maine can give $5, but anyone from anywhere in the country can give the $100.
Okay, got it. And then so don't give more than 105. Okay.
No. I can't take it.
She can't take it. She's clean. She can't take it. Okay.
Yeah, don't want to.
Okay, it's a pretty sweet system. Anyway, and then ranked choice voting, real quick on that too, because there's 29 people in the race overall. So how does ranked choice voting work for people who are not familiar with it? And it always seems like hypothetical, but it's not hypothetical. It actually exists. It's in Maine. So how does it work?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The voters passed ranked choice voting a couple years ago to say, we want to be able to vote. Well, the reason we have Paul LePage, right, is because we didn't have ranked choice voting. So he won his first election with 32% of the vote. And so it was like, okay, this doesn't work. And we want people to be able to be independents, and we want to not just have a two-party system, but we want the person who's going to win to have more than 50% of the people supporting them. So in ranked choice, what you do is instead of just voting for one person, you say, okay, Betsy's my number one person, the next person's my number two person, the next person's my number three person. If nobody gets above 50% in that first counting, then the lowest person drops out, and that person's people who voted for them, then they take their number two people and they distribute them to the other candidates. And if still nobody is over 50%, then the lowest person drops out, and then their number two people go. So until you get somebody who wins, who has more than 50% of the vote. Now, in Maine, it's fascinating because our Supreme Court in Maine said, well, because of the way that it's written, it's not going to actually apply in the general election because our Constitution says plurality. But in the primary, it is going to make a difference. So imagine in a 12-way primary, people are going to get to vote for all of us. They're going to rank us 1 through 12. And then as people drop out from the bottom, those votes will be redistributed until we get to somebody who's over 50%. And it's such a good way, I think, to do it because a couple of things. One is it opens up the lane for people who are not part of the party system, not part of the, the old guard, old network, because a lot of people, their number two person is going to move that person up. And the other thing is that it requires us then to be really civil and kind to people during the campaign. So none of that nasty going tearing people down, because if I want to be your number two, I can't be all awful about number one. So I think it's really going to help with that cynicism and the thing that people hate about politics, which is just people saying how awful the other person is instead of what they're going to do. So that we have that opportunity. But in Maine, the people voted for it. The legislature this year said, no, we're going to do this in 2021. We're going to put it off. And we have an opportunity to do a people's veto, which we have done. We collected 82,000 signatures in 90 days to say no. we mean it. We mean what we said. We actually mean what we said. And so now we are going to have ranked choice voting in our primary.
But I hear in ranked choice voting, the #1 spot is the sweet spot.
Well, it would be great to be the sweet spot, but I think what happened. So we did a Facebook, which I know is not scientific or anything, but in the Facebook poll, right on the first round, the most traditional establishment Democrat was #1, but by the third round, some more progressive people had moved up, and by the last round, I was on top.
Wow, that's amazing! I love this democracy breaking out throughout the country. All right, we're running low on time, so I'm only gonna, we've already talked about how you fought for clean elections, you fought for family medical leave. I see your #1 issue is universal single payer health care. I understand all that. So I wanna actually ask you about, and everybody go to the sweetforgovernor.com, find out all of her campaign positions, and then see if you can volunteer or donate, et cetera. But I want to ask you about one question that is particular to Maine. That's water resources. So what's going on there, and what's your policy on it?
Wow. Well, we have, we are blessed to have huge water resources in Maine, but right now they are not in a public trust. And so companies like Nestle, and which is Poland Spring, is coming and extracting huge amounts of water out of the ground for nothing. And they give $10,000 to the library, and there are some jobs related to it. But we don't have any groundwater protection. It needs to be protected just like any other public resource. And so there's that issue. And then the other big issue is our Native American tribes and our Penobscot Nation, and who controls the Penobscot River. So there has been a big issue about pipelines and transmission lines. And so some oil companies and energy companies have bought land all across Maine. And the one place they don't own is the 90 miles that goes, it's like Standing Rock, that goes right by our Penobscot Nation and Indian Island. And so the state has engaged in a fight to say, the Attorney General to say, the state owns the river, not the tribe. So between Nestle and our tribal sharing or honoring the tribes and their water rights, we have a big issue here in Maine. As I said, we're blessed to have a lot of water, but we have got to start making it a public resource and honoring the tribes, not something that we are going to give away for free to big corporations who give big PAC dollars to politicians.
Right, and people might not remember this, but Sarah Palin once had an 80% popularity rating when she was governor of Alaska. You know why? Because she said to the people of Alaska, we're going to do a little bit of socialism. She didn't call it that, but it actually was. She said the oil under Alaska is the citizens' oil, and she made the oil companies give more of that money to the citizens. So I don't know why in Maine, when it is your water, that the company who profits greatly from it wouldn't pay you. It doesn't make any sense at all. So all right, Betsy Sweet, everybody check out sweetforgovernor.com, and if she wins, the last two governors of Maine would be sweet and sour.
And just how sweet it could be. With a name like Sweet, how could I not run?
Come on, too easy. All right, thank you so much, Betsy. Really appreciate it. Good luck.
You, Cenk. It was great to talk to you.